Hello there. What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be asking the question, will Star Wars Armada see even more factions, specifically the First Order and the Resistance, from the Sequel Trilogy? If you are new here, there is a new giveaway going on right now for a $25 Amazon gift card. If you want a chance to win that, all you have to do is be a subscriber and leave a comment on this or one of my videos. And I would love to hear from you guys on what you think of Armada getting new factions, because, well, we've got a couple of capital ships in the Sequel Trilogy, and hey, we know that they're willing to add more factions because the Clone Wars is coming out. So I'm going to talk about all of that today. First up, we've got the Clone Wars coming out. Now, we haven't seen an official announcement from the Clone Wars as far as how it's going to be, what it's going to look like, how it's going to be packaged, what all we're going to see specifically. So I think there's a lot of information still to be gained once FFG sits down and talks with us about the Clone Wars. So for right now, there's going to be more information, and we're going to be able to refine this speculation a little bit more. Now, presumably, we're going to get more information as well as a official release for the Clone Wars, or at least an official announcement for the Clone Wars around Gen Con. They are still targeting fourth quarter 2020, but at this rate, I am almost certain that's going to be pushed back into 2021, probably first or even maybe second quarter. They'll probably go first. So I would guess we're probably looking at March, the very, very end of March, for something like the Clone Wars corset for Star Wars Armada. Or corsets, I guess you could say. Because what it does look like is that we're getting two basically faction starters called fleet expansions, and we're getting also squadron expansions, and then a couple of other things like a card pack and some dial expansions. And so all of that is great, but if they are indeed going with individual fleet expansions, then it doesn't, it stands to reason that maybe they can, keep going with more factions. And so let's talk about the Sequel Trilogy. Now, I don't want to get into too much about the movie specifically, or all three movies specifically, because I know there's a lot of varied opinions on there, and I am of the opinion generally that over time, when there's been more time and more content developed in that time period, people's opinions of it will grow eventually. But right now, the biggest problem is there wasn't enough time, and I think I felt a little bit similar after the prequel trilogy also. So I think that those things are going to help. But as more content comes out, as more things are developed in that timeline and in that part of the trilogy, or at least in that part of the Star Wars timeline, we will probably eventually grow a little bit more fond of it. And that's the first thing that goes into this, is that people aren't very fond of it just yet. I mean, some people are. I certainly enjoyed all of the movies, but I could say, looking back, that maybe they weren't as epic as I would have liked them to be, right? And so, but then again, Star Wars is something that I think grows over time. And so I think as time goes on, there will be an opportunity to have the Sequel Trilogy in Star Wars Armada. I don't think it's something we want to rush with. I feel like X-Wing did that. They rushed it, and it ended up coming out bad. I think it's the same reason we haven't seen that happen yet for Star Wars Legion. And Legion is a little bit farther ahead as far as adding new factions and new faction support. They're very well into the Clone Wars expansions for Star Wars Legion. And it's going quite well, actually, meshing well with the other factions. The balance is good. We're seeing a lot of different faction identities spring up. And I think Legion's at a point where if they wanted to add more, and they talked about sub-factions, if they wanted to do that, they could. So when will Armada get there? Well, first off, I want to say I do think Armada will get to that point at some point. But one thing I'm not certain of is if they will make both factions, or either at the same time, or if they'll make them both at all. Because the First Order makes the most sense. They're a full-fledged military. They have a full-blown navy. With multiple classes of ships. Now, we don't see that many different classes of First Order ships in the films. I do think if they put them into this game, we will see the Zeiston, which is the new Sith Fleet Star Destroyer. I think that will be under the First Order. It will probably be a subcategory, but it will be under the First Order. I don't think you make a whole faction for a fleet that has only one ship. And that would be the Sith Fleet, because they had only one ship. So I think everything that you would make for the Sith fleet also falls under the First Order, because, well, they were under First Order control for, majority of that movie. Second, the First Order has a wide variety of sizes, right? They've got smaller ships that we've seen in the in the comics and stuff like that. And I think the Poe Dameron comic had the most of them. But they also have huge ships, right? They've got their Dreadnought. Now, of course, we've got the Executor for Star Wars Armada, and it's the Mandator was not as big as the Executor, but it would still be a huge ship. Now, again, and I've said this before when I've talked about the Clone Wars, not every huge ship has to be as big as this thing. I mean, this is a minis game. And this thing, I can't even barely get it on screen. I have to hold it like really far back just to get it in frame. It's monstrous. It's the size of a short sword. You know, it's wonderful. It's actually it's what dreams are made of. But yes, so they've got a wide variety of ship sizes, and they do have a decent amount of ships that are certainly on screen. Between the Finalizer and all of those Star Destroyers, and then their transports, a lot of fighters, because hey, they do exist in Star Wars X-Wing. And so that much is cool. There can be a lot of holdovers from the Empire too, like Raiders and things like that, which have their usage in also in Star Wars X-Wing. They're allowed to use those in X-Wing because hey, the Raiders, they were still Raiders in service apparently that got pulled over to be used with the First Order. So you could probably have a little bit of crossover in that regards, but you don't want too much. Now I think we'll also see more because of shows like Star Wars Resistance, possibly even The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian could delve into that, and that's going to be like the big wild card that we really don't know. But the First Order just makes the most sense. And what I would love to see is for the Resistance not to actually show up as its own faction. This has been talked about a little bit in Legion, but they don't have a navy, right? The Resistance, they had 4 ships. That was it. They had 4 ships. We saw that now the New Republic, on the other hand, had an entire navy. So if they wanted to do the New Republic proper, that would be interesting. But that can't happen for a long time because first off, there's not really a whole lot of New Republic ships that are canon. Now there may have been some in that final battle, but until that gets flushed out, we just simply don't know. So as far as the Resistance, I would rather them just add a lot of stuff to the Rebels. And especially since so much of that end ship was stuff that we already have in game. We've got a lot of MC-80s, we got MC-75s. There were a lot of MC-80s and MC-75s, a lot of MC-30s, a lot of ships that already exist in the Rebels. So that much makes it kind of hard. There were a lot of bunker busters and stuff like that. And so I feel like, with some of those, maybe we could find ourselves having some type of Rebel huge ship also. Because granted, we've got the MC-80, but the Raddus, as seen in The Last Jedi, was much bigger than this. It was not as big as the Executor, but that would be a Rebel. If the Rebels were ever going to get a huge ship, that would be how you would do it. And I just don't think you need to justify, an entire faction for the Resistance when they could easily just fit into the Rebellion. Plus, most of the leaders were the same. You've got Akbar and Leia and all. You don't have that many new leaders. You have a couple, but not that were fleet commanders. Just not that many. So it really stands to reason to me that they would fit well in just the Rebellion being more of a ragtag rebellion. Plus, the symbol is basically the same. It's still the same Firebird, right? And that's one of the things I don't like as much about X-Wing's Resistance factions versus their Rebel factions is it's all the same ship. They're all X-Wings and A-Wings and Y-Wings and B-Wings. It's the exact same thing, just slight variations on them. I'm it's just not super crazy about the exact carbon copy. And I think that's one of the cooler things that you saw with the Clone Wars is you saw a lot more different ships. There was a little bit of crossover. Like the ARC 170s looked a little bit like X-Wings. You could say I could see that was may have been an evolution. The Y-Wings were even way more different than the Resistance Y-Wing to the Rebel Y-Wing, right? So I just feel like I don't think we necessarily need a whole new faction of Resistance. They work a little bit better in X-Wing because there's more there's more fighters, and that's kind of how the Resistance works. But they don't really function as a proper navy, and I feel like that's one of the things that the Rebels do. But then again, they may still do it. But that could be part of the faction identity also, is that maybe that's just one of the Rebels have, is they have a lot wider selection. Another thing is the Rebels are really in need of another medium ship, and there's so many different ships that are available to be used in this case that maybe could fit that bill. That Ninka bunker buster ship, because it's so wide, it might be able to function as a medium ship. Although I still think it's probably a small ship, probably along the mass of a Gladiator Star Destroyer, but still it's wide enough and awkwardly shaped enough that I feel like they could probably get away with it to do something like that, or the Nebulon C perhaps. So there's definitely a few new ships, and hey, that'd be great for the Rebels to get a few new ships. But that's what I have to say about it. So I just don't think they're going to do it anytime soon. I think it'll happen years from now if they're going to do it. And I don't think they need to copy the exact same formula from the first two trilogies, and that two different factions and they're mirrored off of each other or whatever. Because I'm like, well, why not just add the First Order and add the Resistance stuff to the Rebels, and then you can have the Rebels versus the First Order. And because by that time too, that'll be 5 factions. You'll have enough factions that you don't have to worry about a perfect mirror match for the First Order. Additionally, if you wanted to add a match for the First Order, I think it should be the New Republic. Like I said earlier, the New Republic had a standing navy. It makes more sense. But before we can add the New Republic, we need more stuff to flush out what exactly the New Republic is. And again, we go back to The Mandalorian. That could be the series that actually shows you some of the New Republic's proper navy. All right, guys. Well, let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. I will be looking forward to hearing from you. And let me know if you're watching The Mandalorian, because I think that's going to be that, and the evolving Star Wars universe is going to be some of the things that kind of showcase what happens. The rumored Ahsoka sequel, or show rather, that will happen probably in the same timeline. That one also may focus on New Republic stuff as well. It'll be really exciting to see where they go. All right, guys, that's all I've got. I want to thank you all so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.